Hi, everyone. You can comment on the conversation that Tom and I are about to have in chat. You can ask questions in Q&A during this webinar. And then at the end of John Brandi's reading of the text, you can raise your hand if you would like to ask questions live. We'll be answering questions at the very end of the program live.
Right, but what you will be seeing is a pre-recorded conversation between Lynn and myself, and then we'll come back to answering your questions live. So shall we begin, Lynn?
Yeah, sure. Here we go.
Hello and welcome. And hello, Lynn in Maryland. I'm Tom Leech in Santa Fe, New Mexico.
I'm Lynn Sures in Colesville, Maryland.
We'd like to show you how we produced a really fantastic book over the last couple of years.
La Mano dell'Uomo, The Human Hand, by Bruno Caruso. Translated by Lynn Sures, a handmade book by Tom Leech and Lynn Sures.
Welcome. This hand is greeting you, and this is the cover of our handmade paper book. Let's move on. So there's a backstory to how this book came about. If you can see behind me, there's one of my paintings, and it's a painting I did of my wife, Kathleen Coltis, who is a potter. And some years ago, she was having serious problems with her hands, and we were quite concerned about her ability to continue her life's work. So I was looking for images of hands on the internet, and I found this interesting looking book, which I purchased. I was delighted when it arrived, except it was all in Italian. The illustrations were fabulous of hands doing various things, very reminiscent of the artist Ben Shahn, who was a model for me when I was starting my art career. Just to jump way ahead in this story,
I was years ahead.
Yeah, several years ahead. I was able to acquire for our museum the copy of the book that Bruno Caruso inscribed to his friend Ben Shahn, and you'll see the significance of the foot holding the pen later. Lynn might have something to say about the text that you're looking at.
Well, I do, but I think it's kind of interesting the way I got involved in this project, because Tom, you're the one who discovered the book in such an unusual manner, and you might not know how I initially heard about this. Our friend Jane Farmer, who I was staying with while I taught a workshop in papermaking in Taos, had mentioned to me that you had a project that you thought I might like to collaborate on with you. And I thought, oh, great, I love Tom and I'll be happy to collaborate with him on something. And then I found out that you wanted me to translate a book into English from Italian. And I thought, ooh, I don't know if I want to use all that possible studio time to be doing a translation. So when you did get to Taos and you showed me the book, it immediately, I mean, all I had to do was look at it and the fantastic illustrations and the interesting text that, I mean, was so compelling as an artist. And I knew I wanted to do this. So that's the birth of our project together. And the text in Italian is laid out completely differently.
Sort of running prose.
Yeah, running prose, and you'll see that Tom had an interesting brainstorm as we move ahead in how to adapt this for the book that we ultimately made. So we found ourselves happily a couple of years later in Fabriano, Italy, to make the paper for the book, and we had some interesting backstory on that as well.
Well, sure. How we got to Fabriano goes back to 2002 when Lynn and I were both invited, again by Jane Farmer, to participate in the Smithsonian Folklife Festival, which featured artists from the Silk Road all the way from Japan to Italy. And we had an area set up for paper making and paper arts. And Lynn and I were able to meet. We were introduced to Giorgio Pellegrini, who was the director of the Museum of Paper and Watermark in Fabriano. Out of that introduction, Lynn formed a very strong and long-lasting friendship with Giorgio. And we communicated over the years. And there was always the invitation to come back and make paper in Fabriano, which I never forgot. I was always looking for that opportunity.
Yeah, well, I was in Fabriano after that meeting every year because Giorgio and I had brainstormed a way of instructing foreign students in the Italian arts of paper making and related printing and book binding. And so I was very familiar with the museum and with Giorgio, the director of the museum. But Tom and I decided that this was the moment, because if we were going to collaborate on Bruno's book, we needed to make the paper in Fabriano.
Where the paper for the original book was made.
Right. And so we got a residency and we worked together using this mold that we chose from several others that were offered to us to make all the sheets of paper for all the books, 900 sheets of handmade paper we made together.
Right. So here we find ourselves in the laboratory or the studio at Fabriano making paper. And Lynn and I have both been paper makers for years and years, but I had never had a chance to work in such an environment, which was sort of, the feeling was incredible. Fabriano, for those of you who don't know, is one of the birthplaces of paper making in Europe, going back to the 1200s. And so, in a sense, I felt like I was in the holy of holies, and right in the middle of where one who has loved paper for so many years would only dream of finding himself.
Yeah, and I too hadn't had an opportunity to work on a project like this in Fabriano. I had been there many times and used the studio with students in many ways, but it was another thing entirely to get this chance to work not only with Tom but also in Fabriano in this Dominican monastery that is the paper museum there. So we had many different processes of paper making that are illustrated here rather quickly. You can see Tom stirring some pulp that has just been introduced into the vat, and the mold is resting up on a platform, and he made a sheet, and then after the sheet is made, you need to remove the decal from the sheet in such a way that you don't drip water drops all over your paper and create what they call paper maker's tears. we pressed our own, we couched our own sheets. And here you see me working with Roberto Rapanotti, who is a master paper maker at the museum, and Roberto and another master paper maker there, Luigi Michella, each were incredibly generous, giving us their time to assist us, just so that we had 3 people working more like the traditional paper making production would have been in the 1200s. 3 or 4 people at the bat and at the couching table.
Yeah, and I would like to say that even though I've been making paper for, I don't know, 40 years or something like that, it was just wonderful to have Roberto or Luigi just show us a little tiny trick, just the way to hold your finger in just a certain way as you lift the decal off, or tip the mold just so to drain. It was really a great experience.
So then it was time to press, and you can see over here on the left a sheet of paper that has been couched, which means it's laid down on a felt and stacked with many other such sheets to make a post. And you see the impression of the watermarks from the wire mold that you saw in the previous image. And these are reproductions sewn by Luigi Michella of early Fabriano watermarks. And so that's really why we picked this mold to use. And you see that in the lower picture on the left, you see what the watermark looks like when it's pressed. So that horse there that you see with light shining through it, you also see just above it in the larger sheet as a small impressed watermark.
And then what you see, the 2 press photographs are the post of paper and felts being lifted up inside. This is a converted olive press, and it puts, if I remember right, about 220 tons of pressure on this stack of paper. And once it really, the squeeze starts happening, you see the water just pours out like a waterfall. It's quite interesting to see.
Yeah, a sheet of paper has a very, very large percentage of water and just a small percentage of fiber. And so all that water most of that water has to be extracted in the pressing to give the sheet its strength and its structure. So after the sheets are pressed, and you see that post of pressed sheets, they need to be removed from each one removed from the felt and stacked one on top of the other. And at that point, they have enough integrity to stay stacked up, even though they're still damp, without getting stuck together. And so you see here Roberto, in another role of assisting us so graciously, getting the sheet stacked very, very expertly. Look how neat that stack is. All the edges are lined up. And we did the same. These are all processes we do as well. You can see in the tiny center photo the decal edge of the sheets that are just pressed but not yet dried.
And that's a beautiful sight for a paper maker, I have to tell you.
Yeah. And Tom and I mean, Tom, I like the pictures where you see us working together, because my recollection of that very long period of us making paper for 10 hours a day for many days, was that we were always working together, and we were switching roles back and forth, and just one complementing the other. And it was just a tremendous experience. I know it was exciting to be in Fabriano, but it was really very exciting, at least for me as an artist and friend, to be able to work in this way with you.
Absolutely, yeah, yeah.
So here we have Bruno Stroppa, who is using the heated cylinder to dry the sheets from our pressed post. And you can see in the upper left, Bruno feeding sheets by hand, one at a time, into the little conveyor belt there of felt. And then in the second photo at the bottom left, catching the sheets as they fell out of the cylinder, and then making a neat little stack of our sheets that are dried and ready for us to pick up.
Yeah, the machine was really something. It consists of a huge drum, like maybe a 6 or 8 foot diameter drum. And the wet paper goes in on a felt that is winds through the machine, goes around the drum, and comes out, a minute or two later, dry.
Right. And that drum is filled with steam. It's quite hot.
Yeah, it was a warm room.
Yeah, Bruno was heroic working in there to do this for us in the summertime. Well,
I love this. This was an absolutely sublime experience. So here you see a stack of the edges of our paper, and then we had to figure out how to get it back to the States. I brought an extra suitcase thinking I would be able to bring the paper back in that, but once we saw how much we actually made, and I think we've surpassed what we had set about to do. So we had all this paper, so we wrapped it up in bundles and had to ship it back to Santa Fe by Federal Express. But just handling this freshly made, beautiful, sort of virgin white paper was, it's a sublime experience, I have to tell you.
Yeah, and you can see, it's like a precursor of the book to look at this photo on the left and see that each sheet is sort of a living form. Although they're pressed and they're nice and flat and great for printing, they're handmade. Every single one is handmade, and it shows the signs of, the human hand right there in the sheet. And this is such a meaningful significance or meaningful fact for the book that was to ensue.
Right. We really insisted on this being as handmade as possible. That was the whole point, and trying to honor Bruno Caruso's original idea. You'll see how the book comes together from this point on.
Yeah. So we suddenly jump in our images ahead to 2021, but as everyone knows, time did not jump from the end of 2019 till 2021. We went through the pandemic, and Tom and I weren't able to get together right away, which had been our plan to go ahead and print our book. But
right. My studio there, the print shop at the museum, was closed. The whole museum was closed, not only to the public, but to employees. It just, Lynn and I knew we were committed to making this book, but we just didn't know how and when we would do it.
Right. I couldn't travel safely. I live so many thousands of miles from Santa Fe, and I wasn't going to get onto a plane. So, it wouldn't have been possible for so many reasons. But, Tom, we didn't let it drop. We worked on a lot of things that we needed to work on so that when we finally did get to meet in Santa Fe in 2021, we once again hit the ground running.
Right. Yeah, a lot of emails, a lot of You know what? In 2019, no one had ever heard of Zoom before. So I think it's really interesting that has become part of the presentation now. That's why you're watching this program.
Yeah, but we had Zoom meetings where we worked things out together. We Tom would get a design idea for how the book could be structured, and he would send it to me. I'd look at it, make comments. I would fiddle with the translation, send it back to Tom. He'd make comments, and we were back and forthing constantly so that we don't feel like we lost time, but we certainly didn't use it in the way that we had anticipated back in summer of 2019.
Right. So now the handwork shifts to printing. And I was in the museum wearing my mask as I was required to do, but just starting to assemble type. I guess, here you see a typeface for those of you who aren't familiar with hand typesetting. You see up in the upper right, the California job case, where each of those boxes has an assigned letter, and that's sort of a universal arrangement in print shops. So once you learn how to set type, you know what's in every one of those little boxes. On the left, Lynn is going through some of the paper, and I think you're counting out the sheets that we designated for each page to go through the press. I'll jump ahead to say that the edition of the book, we printed 100 copies of the book. So we divided our 900 sheets into individual units so we know what we would end up with.
Right. And we also selected out certain sheets that were slightly heavier in weight than some of the other sheets so that we could use those as our cover sheets.
Right, right.
So once the work of choosing the papers and getting knowing where we were going to print and everything was ready, then Tom had a lot of work to do, and I was simply the assistant. This isn't my area of expertise, so I was an extra pair of hands, and Tom was the expert here.
Well, there's a lot to talk about here. The images for the book, Bruno Caruso's drawings, we printed from polymer plates. So those were photographed from the original book, and my colleague at the museum, James Borland, made the polymer plates of the illustrations. Now, one thing we should point out: our book is about almost twice the size of the original, and that goes back to when we first got to Fabriano, and they offered us the use of any mold. And we picked that one with the watermark. So we went over there really without knowing exactly what size our book was going to be. So once we made the paper, then I had to design the book around the sheet size. And we realized, if you remember going back to the original book, the type was large and the drawings were smaller, and we reversed that. So we made our type smaller and drawings larger. So we really did rethink and reimagine this book. So you have the illustrations being done by polymer, but the type is essentially hand set. Now, we chose two typefaces for this. Bruno's text we set in Bodoni, a great Italian font, and the didactic material we set in Bembo, also another Italian font. The Bembo I started out hand setting it and realized I didn't have enough to do the whole book. So we ordered 2 or 3 more fonts of the Bembo to complete the hand setting of the didactic. the Bodoni type for Bruno's text we had made by set in monotype, which is a way of, we send the text to a caster. In this case, it was Ed Rayer at Swamp Press in Massachusetts. And he typed it into his casting machine, and it came out in lines of type set as we wanted, with certain changes that we could make, because it's just one letter at a time is cast into a line. But still removable, not quite like linotype where the whole line is a solid block. I just want to say on the right, if there are any typesetters out there, I am doing what is often frowned upon, is using tweezers on type, because you can damage type with tweezers. But in Bruno's illustration, he shows a hand reaching into type and pulling out a letter with tweezers. Well, in this case, I'm only pulling out a space between words, so it's not too dangerous an attempt there.
And also, I'll point out that in the smaller image at the top where you see the polymer plate, you can see by this that we were able to really hand print the exact illustrations that Bruno did. This isn't just a mechanical process of transferring images and enlarging as if it were a copier machine. So we have, a raised image in polymer there that is the exact duplicate of the image of Bruno's drawing in his book, thanks to James's expertise in creating the polymer plates. And so the images of Bruno's drawings are really Bruno's drawings in our book.
One more thing to say, this is for the letterpress printers out there, because the paper had 4 decals all the way around. Keeping registration is a little tricky running through a Vandercook press. So what I'm doing there is I'm switching the orientation of the side guide, so the sheets will still go into the grippers as they normally do, but I have a long edge to register with. So the sheets were registered against that long piece of printing furniture rather than just the simple side guide. That makes sense to me. Go on.
So this is a really important set of images for people who have never printed before. And you can see Tom just operating the Vandercook press on the image on the left. And Tom, I'll let you talk about it, but I just wanted to point out that the 2 stages that we show, you loading the paper on the right and running the press on the left, are part of the fact that although this is a machine, it works in concert with the human hand.
Indeed. Yeah, so the sheets are, I just call it crank through the press. So I have to take, probably 3 or 4 steps forwards and backwards to follow the paper through until it's printed, and then after it's printed. The image in the center was the ink that we mixed for the job. And the funny story about that is that Bruno's book had a red cover, so we also wanted to incorporate some color into it, not just black and white. And I was searching around for colors, and actually, if we go back to Fabriano, the little Saturday and Sunday flea market right across from the museum, I picked up a book that was printed in Fabriano in the 1970s, and it had red type in it. And I really liked the look of that, although I didn't care for that particular shade of red. So I was searching around for a lot of different reds. I'll jump ahead. You'll see the case for the book that we made, and I was searching for a color for the book cloth, and I looked out the window of the print shop, and on the street were parked side by side a Volvo and a BMW, and they were both this sort of deep copper. So I took the samples of book cloth out and held it up against each car and decided I liked the color of the BMW better. So I went back in, and then that was going to be the color of the ink that I chose. So the morning that I mixed up all the ink, I happened to have a bag full of cherries to eat for lunch, and I noticed that the color was almost exactly the same. So that's how I arrived at the color that we used on the pages, the text pages.
Yeah, and well, a tiny backstory on that, you know, as with the other things, there were back and forths with, you know, Tom sending me samples of different book cloths because, you know, we were pretty adamant about wanting red to be the color for this book somehow, but neither of us liking red book cloth, basically, and also neither of us liking so much the very bright color of red that was available, you know, for the original copy of Bruno's libretto, small book. And so, you know, we were kind of up against a wall, but those breakthroughs of the car and also the cherries really was just so wonderful and solved our problem so that we both we're completely satisfied with the red. And, you know, those of you who maybe aren't as involved in color as some artists are, might not appreciate just how one red and another red, you know, one can be off-putting and the other can be just perfectly satisfying. And so that was the struggle we went through for this seemingly simple choice.
I like the way you used your hands there, Lynn. It was like very Italian.
I didn't know I was even doing it.
Yeah.
So
I need to talk about, we actually printed this from two different presses. So the previous ones were printed again at James Borland, my colleague's workshop, using his Vandercook SP20. It's a larger press that allowed for the sheets to be run in a certain way. But here we are in the print shop at the Palace of the Governors, and Lynn and I are just laying out on the left the type for the title page, and on the right, Lynn is doing a little curating of picking up probably just a speck out of the paper.
yeah, sorry about my phone ringing, my weird little alien sound. Yeah, it's interesting to me as a non-printing professional to realize how the pages have to go through the press a number of times to have both the polymer image and the various colors of text applied, you know, through the press. And so Tom is so expert at just juxtaposing and finessing the setup so that things come out as they should. And then once printed, you know, you still have to curate the sheets and check to see that there isn't a little speck of something that's sitting there that needs to get flicked off, which is, you know, what I was doing with the loop up there.
So running the sheet through the press, I think each sheet probably had to go through the press at least 4 times, and some maybe more. but on the left, I'm there in the print shop at the History Museum. And on the right, we're back at James's studio, and Lynn was catching the sheets as they were coming off.
Stacking them up like this. And yeah, as for what you were saying about the sheets being printed a number of times, you can see a little bit on the sheet on the lower right that you can still see a little tiny bit of what's printed on the back of it. These handmade sheets are tough enough to be printed, you know, not only many times, but also on both sides of the sheet so that, you know, when these get folded up, they read as, you know, the book intends. You know, something else about this is interesting to me. This is the sheet on the lower right is a wonderful example of how we were able in our, you know, re-envisioning of this book to create pages in which the text itself made sense with the images. And in Bruno's book, although the text certainly was illustrated by the images, things weren't always able to be on the same page with, you know, the text and corresponding image since it was running prose. But in our re-envisioning of the book, we were able to make that coordination that is really satisfying to me as a reader to go through our book and see it having evolved in that way.
There you can see the image of the Bruno's image of the hand with the tweezers moving type, which really piqued my interest in the book in the first place. So, you know, it was so great to reach this point. You know, for 2 years or more, Lynn and I had been talking about this, and you know, it was still sort of an abstract thing. And then all of a sudden, the finished pages start building up, and it's really coming to life. And again, you see the paper behaving the way it wants to, which I admire. And in fact, that's what attracts me to handmade books, is when the paper is asserting itself.
So all the pages ended up folded and
well, collated and folded, and we well, I don't know if they're sewn here in this picture or not, but they're
punched.
Yeah, they're punched in the spine. I like this because it juxtaposes a page from the Gutenberg Bible, which of course you have to realize what started this whole thing to begin with.
Those tiny holes on the side for non-binders, those tiny holes that are punched along the spine edge or the folded edge of our books. Those are the holes into which the thread is sewn by hand to bind each book. So we've got a few images of the completed book for a quick little teaser.
Yeah, and so when we were originally thinking of the book, I thought this would be bound conventionally with a hard binding. And we did have a dummy made with our binder, Rosalia Galassi. And it didn't let the paper do what it wanted to do. And then what I really loved, and what is the strong point of this book, I think, is when you actually handle the paper itself. Mm-hmm. And so we decided to make a clamshell box for it. So I did the sewing of the pages, but then Rosalia Galassi, who is in Italy right now, made 100 of these cases for to hold the book. And this allows you to pick up the book and experience the paper just as we did.
And in the design of our clamshell, we respect the two colors that we use throughout the book, which is the black and the red. And so we felt like we had a book cloth that we both were very much in favor of, which at the very beginning of our search, we really didn't know that we would find the right red cloth, but we are very, very satisfied with the vividness of this red book cloth. And here's our title page. And
yeah, the hand on the title page is taken from the hand on the cover of the original book.
And here you see the spines of the boxes with our labels, La Mano dell'Uomo, the human hand by Bruno Caruso. And we were able to have the image that we feel represents the book, the hand by Caruso, as part of the label.
You know, Lynn, it's occurring to me that we really haven't talked much about Bruno Caruso and how we sort of tracked him down, but that's a whole nother story. Yeah. I will say that we were able to do this book with the help of quite a few people, including Bruno Caruso's grandson, who gave us permission, his blessing, to go ahead with the book and design it as we wanted. And so we're really grateful to him and all the other people who helped us on this, did a lot of sleuthing for us to get this thing going.
Yeah, and I also want to single out Roberto Stelluti, who knew Bruno Caruso. Roberto is an artist friend of mine in Fabriano, a very accomplished printmaker, and he very graciously wrote an essay for us to include in the book, which to me gives it some more of that human touch to be able to reach back in that way to Bruno.
We would really encourage people to read more about Bruno Caruso, quite an amazing artist. And a website that his grandson set up, www.bruno-caruso.com. You can find virtually everything Bruno did on that website. It's pretty amazing.
Right. And so you can see on this page information about the book and its availability, and also a way to contact Tom and me if you would like to. And please feel free to, take a screenshot of this page and avail yourself of all the different things that are listed on here. Okay.
All right. Well, thank you very much for joining us and hearing the story of how this book came together. And we hope you stick with us. There's more to come.
Yeah, we'd like to have you join us to hear a special treat, which is a beautiful interpretation of the words of Bruno Caruso in the reading by John Brandi.
I'd like to say a few words about John Brandi, who will be reading Bruno Caruso's message. John lives near the small northern New Mexico town of El Rito. He is an internationally recognized poet, writer, artist, and teacher, and also a world traveler. He recently returned from a trip to Italy, where he did visit the Museum of Paper and Watermark in Fabriano. John and I have collaborated on many Palace Press publications for one good reason. He's just that good. He is absolutely simpatico with Bruno Caruso's work and our project, and we are grateful to him for joining us.
La Mano dell'Uomo, The Human Hand, by Bruno Caruso, translated by Lynn Sures. Text read by John Brandi. A handmade book by Tom Leech and Lynn Sures.
La Mano dell'Uomo. This is not a guide for palm readers. The hand of man has built all the wonders that now surround us, and it continues tirelessly to build without rest, hour after hour. There is no time to use it to foresee the future. In fact, the human hand is above all industrious, adaptable to the most varied uses. It has made everything it uses by itself for its own use. If it is true that the mind directs its own numerous applications, gets accustomed to its routine, imposes upon itself the most strenuous efforts, it is also true that the hand quietly constructs everything. Only when the human mind gets foggy and triggers cataclysms does the hand take up instruments of destruction. It performs its massacres, smashes, kills, exterminates. The traces of its rash acts remain latent only in the mind, where memories and remorse are found. The hand reprises its peaceful and industrious tendencies after having sealed an extraordinary and magnificent gesture of peace, shaking the hand of the former enemy, and with a wide gesture, it returns to sow the wheat on the earth soaked with blood. It is again the hand that rubs the forehead to drive away those ugly thoughts, and from the forehead it cleanses the sweat of fatigue. It feeds us when it slices fragrant bread, when it cuts an apple and brings a piece of it to the mouth. It is in these very ancient gestures that it concentrates all its infinite possibilities of love. It is not the palm reader's Mount of Venus, the turgid mounds that seem to reveal sensuality and eroticism, which make sure that caresses show the taste of loving. In lovemaking, the hand has a secondary role. Let's not forget that it can also substitute for love, and the entire body trembles like the hand. But when it performs its ancestral gestures and tears off a bad shoot, or gently grafts a wild shrub with a fruit tree, or gathers bunches of grapes with tenderness, then the hand expresses a boundless love for life. It has always struggled with archaic tools, with the scythe that notches the ash tree and causes the manna that does not fall from heaven, or rubber or resin to flow, with the grindstone to sharpen the blade, pressing it hard on the hot stone. There are infinite hands, countless gestures, hands that hold the rudder bar, coil the rope, or turn the wheel, or push the lever to raise greater weights, using the weight of the body, or handle the pruning billhook and the axe with precision to sever with a blow. Hands that use the hoe, the pickaxe, the hammer, scissors, the pen, or hit hard with a mallet. And also the unseen hands of the typographer who composed this text for you. Then furthermore, the hand has made itself expert. It sharpens the pencil in elegant twirls, gently turns the compass and the screw, carefully holds the lens to make objects larger, confidently draws a precise line. On the tips of the fingers, it calculates to know how much this or that costs. Then it presses the keys of the calculator, plays musical instruments, makes itself an accomplice, ally, or servant of the other senses. It gesticulates, fidgets, points, squeezes. With one's temple resting on a closed fist, it even focuses ideas. It gives life and takes it away. With a thumbs down, it condemns, punishes, it disfigures for revenge, it murders. Hands that steal are constrained by handcuffs for punishment. Humans like their marvels, drawings of enlightened minds, projects created with expertise, their minutiae, miniatures, and the colossus, which when it collapses, falls because its feet are clay. If the hand gets something wrong, it is called pedestrian. It grabs the grip, turns handles, carries out maneuvers, browses manuals, handles knobs, manipulates artifacts. The scribe with his manuscript, the rogue ready for violence with his hands, the work of manual laborers, the handsome gigolo in shirt sleeves. There are among these words infinite common gestures, gestures having so perfected their works as to lose the sense of their own value. The index finger that once perhaps only squashed an annoying insect, which then pressed the worn-out bell of a friend's house, the large button of the drill, and the cold one of the computer, could press with equal ease the button that activates the latest missiles, those of total destruction. And this laconic but definitive gesture would mean the end of the world. It is not the index finger itself that says no to this errant possibility. Rather, it is human reason that opposes it. My hand now raises the glass, hoping for reasonably happy times, and toasts to your health and ours, and signs Bruno, Caruso.
That was just so lovely. And I was so captivated listening to the words instead of reading and thinking and translating them.
They come alive, yeah.
They
Thank you.
did. Thank you so much.
Well, that was fun. That was really great to see again. And I want to thank everybody who stayed with us. I took a look once at who the attendees were, and it was great to see so many friends out there, and we really appreciate you staying with us. And I believe if we can go to a live question and answer, if that's possible.
Yeah, I also would like to join Tom in really thanking you all for being with us for this. You can really pick up on our own enthusiasm, but it's really a wonderful feeling to see folks out there that have followed us through this short saga, and seeing the most interesting names popping up on chat. Thank you all so much. So yeah, let's go to live Q&A.
So Margaret Prentice has her hand up. So Margaret, I'm going to allow you to speak. So you can unmute yourself.
I think I'm not muted. Is that correct?
No, we hear you, Margaret.
We hear you, Peggy.
Okay. Yeah. So I have two questions on the paper making part. One, you didn't mention what kind of fiber is in your paper. And also you didn't mention if you needed to calendar your paper before you printed it.
The fiber was alpha cellulose half stuff. They had stacks of it, and running it through the beater. We were working in the beater room as well. So Bruno Stropa would crank up the beater for a couple hours, and we had to vacate the room, I think, because it was pretty noisy.
Very loud. Yeah.
Oh.
And
And
calendar.
Did you need to calendar it?
No, not at all. Not at all.
Okay.
It printed really nicely.
It pressed really, I mean, there is a sensation of texture on it, but it's not out of hand, and it worked well enough. In fact, we looked at a possibility of calendaring it, and we decided against it because we felt like it was going to be able to be up to the task of being printed on as it was, and it had a little bit more physicality the way it was.
Real tactile quality is what we wanted.
Yeah.
Great question. Thank you, Peggy.
Okay, and there's a question from Laurel Moorhead in the Q&A saying, "This is wonderful. Was this originally written as a letter to Bruno's friends?"
It was a New Year's greeting. It was his New Year's greeting to his friends, but we didn't even realize that until we kind of thought about the implications of the kind of the information at the end of the book. It certainly was an elaborate greeting, but yeah, that's what it was.
It's also interesting to point out that this is one of the very first imprints of an Italian press, Edizione dell'Elefante, that went on to become a very distinguished press. But this doesn't even show up in their catalog raisonné, but it was printed by them at the very beginning of their operation.
Yeah, they continued printing Bruno's books during the entire time that they were in operation.
Researching the history of the book was fascinating in itself, and trying to track down people who might have known about it, or who might have known Bruno Caruso or the publisher. And it took a while, but all of a sudden all the pieces of the puzzle fell together, and one of the coolest things to have happen, because I couldn't find anything on Bruno Caruso for the longest time, and then I Googled him one more time, and a fabulous website came up, and it had just been posted by his grandson, Jenner Del Vecchio, who is joining us now.
I see Jenner's wonderful post in chat.
Right.
Hello, Jenner.
He was so supportive of this project. We're ever so grateful.
Yeah. Thank you, Laurie, for that question.
And Brian has a question. How is the paper sized, and did you dampen it for printing?
There was internal sizing, and we did not dampen it.
Oh. Sometimes with handmade paper, once it dries the first time, you just let well enough alone, let it be, and do what you can with printing. And I find even if I print an etching, which normally you would soak a page when you do an etching, I'll just give it the lightest mist and just kind of sandwich it and let it be the least bit damp for printing for that same reason.
Yeah, we really didn't have to. The paper had sort of a very gentle cockle to it, that when the pages were folded, it just has it just lays beautifully, and we didn't have to dampen it at all. I smacked the paper pretty well, so you'll see the impression coming through the other side, which that's just the way it turned out, handmade all the way, through and through.
I think so far there were a few questions. I know Tom and Lynn, you had a graphic about ordering the book, and there was a question: is if it's available through the press?
Well, through the Museum of New Mexico Foundation website, and there is a link on there, and if you didn't pick it up, you can email me. either here at work or I think we posted my home email, which is Leech, Leech 541 at AOL. And I guess I should warn everybody, I'll only be occupying this seat for about another 2 weeks. From today, I'm retiring from the museum. So the best way to reach me after the first of the year is through that other email.
And also, Chris Albert, who is graciously monitoring the Q&A for us in the chat, is going to be posting the recording of this entire webinar on the YouTube channel of the museum within the next few days, possibly tomorrow. Chris, I can't remember. Is that what you said?
Yeah, but, I'm going to try that. I'll shoot for tomorrow, and I'm putting the link to the museum YouTube page in the chat now.
Perfect. So anybody who kind of meant to get that information, the contact information, and didn't get around to the getting a screenshot, you have another chance at it. And of course, you can contact either one of us. You know, I'm going to interrupt for a second because I see a related question from Jeannie Drews. Hey, Jeannie. Anyone reviewing? Answer, not to my knowledge. How about you, Tom?
No. Hadn't occurred to me.
Would be much appreciated,
welcome.
Of course. And wow, you know, just this is my first moment looking through chat, because when I was screen sharing to do the videos, I couldn't see chat, and I'm just so thrilled to see so many of the wonderful people that I know and care about on chat. And just hello to all of you and your dear comments.
Yeah, I wish we could be with you live, believe me. But it did occur to me, Lynn, you're still doing tours of Italy and Fabriano, right?
Yes.
Don't miss it.
We have a tour coming up this summer. Actually, I haven't even advertised it yet. It was full for 2020, and I had to tell those participants that it had to be canceled, obviously, but then unexpectedly it had to be canceled again in 2021 summer because it still wasn't safe. And along the way of the possible number of people, the tours are very small. We could take 6, but we have 4 confirmed right now. So we do actually have 2 spaces left on the Fabriano tour for summer 2022. And you can contact me either through my website or just my email, which is lynn@lynnsures.com or lynnsures@gmail. And I can give you the information about the upcoming tour if you or you and one friend, because that's the only amount of space we have left, would like to join the participants. And we also have one advanced tour for people who have already been on a Fabriano class with me and my wonderful, I'm going to call them students, but really they're participants and super folks. We actually have 1 or possibly 2 spaces left in that tour as well for those who've already participated in the past. So thank you, Tom, for mentioning that.
Don't miss it. Thanks everybody for joining us. This was it was wonderful to make this book, and it's also great to share it with people. And I hope you get to see it.
So true. Thanks. And as you said, Tom, wish we could be with all of you, but sometime soon. Bye now.